Good morning. How are you all? I can see we've got people watching already. It's fantastic. It's Louisa Munson here from the Barefoot Broadcast, and we're coming to you with another live, active, kind of who knows where it's going to go conversation with fantastic Rick Pursell, who's about to join me. I've just lost my face. Where's that gone? There I am. I think I preferred it when I was a bit blurry, actually. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about grief, which was a recommendation from somebody that was watching us last week, or the week before, in fact. And the question that came through in a private message was, where does grief start and where does it end up? And so I asked Rick, which was actually, what our guest, or sorry, one of our audience members, one of our community, our beloved community, asked. They asked if Rick would do this show and talk about his understanding of grief. And just to facilitate this amazing conversation. So I'm going to bring him on now, and also hello Rick.
Hello everybody. And
also say hello to some of the people that we've got in the chat room. So we've got Sarah Taylor joining us, saying pretty in pink. Thank you, Sarah.
Hello, Sarah.
I've actually been running around for 2 hours for all sorts of cat related issues, and I will share that maybe a bit later, but that I might be actually physically pink as well as wearing pink. We've also got Vivian in the chat room as well, saying bon dia, lovely, and a bon dia to you too. Rick, how are you? It's been a couple of weeks.
It's been a couple of weeks. I've been very busy around here. We've just finished today hosting a 10-day retreat here for 10 amazing women from all over the world.
Wow.
And they finally left today in good shape. Amazing shifts going on.
When you said they finally left, it was a bit like,
yes. No, we haven't lost anybody that dramatically, but no, they all had amazing shifts of awareness, and the whole energy was palpable from the day they arrived to when they exited. It was just amazing to feel and be part of that. Although I wasn't part of the retreat, holding space and just enjoying everybody's journey, I guess you could call it.
May I do a plug for heaveninbali.com?
You,
is that right?
You may.
Is it heaveninbali.com?
Yes. Yes.
So Rick has this beautiful home, and I stayed there in Bali, Indonesia. When you can look out at, is it Mount Agung, the volcano?
Actually, no, we're on the way to Mount Batur, but we look over the Bedugo Mountains. There's 5 of them on the horizon.
Beautiful. I've got many photos of those mountains looking sort of like purpley in the distance. It's really gorgeous. So he has an amazing home, and you have weddings there, don't you? And retreats and all sorts.
We've run quite a few spectacular weddings here, and 10 years of retreats every month for 10 years. So.
That's a very big commitment.
Indeed.
So we are going to be talking about grief, where it starts, where it ends. Can I ask, what was your first thought when that title came through, Rick?
I thought it was really appropriate because there is a lot of grief at the moment. As you can imagine, we've got 2 wars going on. There's a lot of incredible amount of disharmony and upheaval in our world today, and that will inevitably produce grief. So it's fitting that we talk about it.
Yeah. We've also got Bob joining us. He's saying hello, or I'm looking forward to the conversation. Howdy.
Hi, Bob.
So where do you want to start then? I would agree. I think the timing is perfect because, like you say, there's a huge outpouring of grief at the moment. And I imagine, and I don't know this for sure, but I imagine that when there is this kind of massive outpouring of grief, that where we have grief somewhere trapped inside our system that is unhealed, that we've not been able to access or something like that, that we might see the grief on the outside, communicated to us via the news and almost encouraged, almost solicited, that it's the perfect thing for us to peg our grief onto, to experience it. Is that how it works?
No, I think that's exactly how it is. We will trigger any unresolved grief within us, and it will make us feel sad and bad. So, yeah, we are the collective. We are the collective human family. So it's no wonder that we're going to feel the pain of mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters, sons and daughters.
Yeah.
Quantum entanglement. We are all quantumly entangled within as the human family. So there can be a transmission of different sensations and feelings. So we're on the receiving end as well as giving.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah's saying, and this is great. Thank you, Sarah, for this. It's almost like you're giving me a script, and I love you for that. I really do. Sarah's saying, how would you explain what grief is, Rick?
Okay, it's multifaceted because grief is crying, basically. It's the exuding of the water element from the body. And it inevitably finishes up in crying. And there's various degrees of it. You can hit your hand with a hammer or something like that, and it can be painful. And you can cry as a result of that physical pain. But we also have mental pain and emotional pain. So it's the grief that comes out, the crying that comes out as a result of, generally, let's focus on the mental and emotional pain that we may be enduring. It's almost inevitably surrounded a loss of some sort.
Yeah.
So that loss can be perceived loss, right, or a real one, and they can both bring grief.
Yeah.
Right? So if we catapult ourselves up into the future and think, how am I going to feel when such and such is not here, when they passed away? So we can put ourselves in the future and we can feel sad as a result of that. We can grieve about something that actually hasn't happened. So there's a mental aspect to that. And of course, the mental body, the thoughts, trigger our emotions. And so if there is a loss, perceived or real, it will trigger this grief. And grief is surprisingly right down the bottom of the scale of emotions. Several people have defined the whole scale of emotions, and grief is right down the bottom. And I find that rather interesting. I don't necessarily agree with it because grief can be incredibly healthy as well. I don't think it's not healthy to stifle that. But I think we probably all agree that grief can almost stall us. We become ineffective. We feel disempowered. We feel incredibly sad. So there's a lot of emotions that are associated with the grief. And it is right down the bottom of the scale of emotions. So I hope that sets the stage for grief.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful, actually. So just to paraphrase, just to think, to see if I've missed anything out. Grief is a crying and an exuding of water. We've got physical pain, the emotional and the mental pain, and the spiritual pain of it. And it can be perceived loss or a real loss. And some people grieve something that hasn't already happened. I've put myself in that category a lot, actually. I spend a lot of time grieving about something that hasn't happened. And on the scale of emotions, you said people have identified it as being right at the base of the scale of emotions, where it leaves you feeling disempowered, stalled, and incredibly sad. But you also said you weren't sure if you would put it down at the lower end of the scale of emotions. Can I ask why that is?
Because I've always found grief to be healthy, as painful as it is, as depressing and powerlessness as it is, and we feel that we're on the victim end of the scale. But for me, it's always been a catalyst of change.
Yeah.
So I guess it's how we deal with it that really is the fulcrum of where it is for us on our journey.
Yeah.
And I invite it. I can cry, unabashedly cry, and I have been doing so as recent as last night. And I'm picking up on the grief of virtually thousands of people. I'm what's called an intuitive empath, and I sense and feel deeply, and I feel the pain of people. And then that's matched with the injustices and all of the insecurity that people are going through. And I feel this wave of grief come over me. I usually just excuse myself from the lounge room and I'll go and bawl my eyes out. And it will be real grief. I'll be almost hyperventilating. It just comes out in a surge. The interesting thing is I know it's not mine.
Yeah.
Right? It's the collective grief. So that's why I see it as a positive, is that if I heal that which is within me as part of the collective, then the collective to some degree gets healed.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I'm the little valve on the pressure cooker. And I don't mean to, exalt myself that I'm saving everybody from pain. That's not how it works for me. I just feel this pressure of the collective pain. And as I'm willing and able to release it through grief, right, then the collective pressure has been depressurized to a certain degree, maybe only a little bit.
Or a lot. I mean, you have no idea, do you, how big that act of grief and courage is. That might actually help other people to come into that space as well. So it could have a massive knock-on effect. And you're really taking one for the team there. When you were describing that, I was thinking about like the pressure inside a bottle of fizzy pop. You're releasing it a little bit, letting some of that gas out. Before we go any further, we've got some more comments coming in. So Owen Lloyd Martin saying, "Morning, Louisa."
Hey, Owen.
Hey, Owen. Good morning, Portugal. That's Carl is saying, "Had never thought of grief as emotional dehydration. So elemental from that point of view." Bon dia, Rick.
Thank you, Carl.
It's actually quite cool. I've never really thought of it in terms of, letting go of the actual waters. I was speaking to somebody who does TCM, like traditional Chinese medicine, and was talking about like the energy of grief and the energy of water. And, it completely gone over my head, to be fair. Sarah is saying, "Wow, so well explained, Rick. Thank you. Do you each think that once we experience real grief, that we are less apt to perceive future grief?" That's a good question. And then she's saying the ultimate alchemy, like transforming grief. That's a great question, Sarah. Thank you. Do you each think that once we experience real grief, that we're less apt to perceive future grief?
I would say that would be a fact, because once we experience something, we are now, it's not new. It's not come as any surprise. So yes, I think it would be easier to handle, knowing that this is either my own personal grief or the collective grief. Either way, if there's healing going on, if there's releasing going on, then there's going to be some improvement.
Yeah.
Either way. So there's an element of grief that is not healthy, and that's to get stuck in it. Right? Not to get stuck in it. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think, yes, it sets you up. It's like any experience. Once you've climbed a mountain once, it's easy to climb another one.
Yeah. Yes, it's interesting because when I met my first boyfriend, Nick, he had grieved the ending of a relationship, and he very early on said, no matter how much I love you, I'm never going to have that reaction about a relationship ever again. And I thought, oh, damn, that's horrible, you know. And then when I met Carl, he said actually the same thing, by which time I'd already decided, you know, I've already done the kind of losing a relationship grief, which you actually met me in some of that. And I realized I probably wouldn't do that in the same way again. You know,
Right.
there is some element of learning, but I mean, the loss of a relationship is different to the loss of an actual physical person, or, you know, I mean, it's although there are similarities, there's also differences, aren't there? In fact,
I think I think that depends on the individual as well.
oh yeah,
Because the loss of a relationship can be devastating to a person, and how do we judge or compare what they are going through relative to the loss of a person? Right? For them, it could be the worst thing that's ever happened to them, and can be life-changing.
Well, I mean, I mean, at that time, that is how I felt. So what kind of losses have we got? Like you mentioned, emotional, spiritual, mental, physical. And so I've just put in like the idea of losing a person, like through the ending of a relationship or through somebody passing away. What other kinds of griefs are there?
Abandonment is a big one, huge
Mm-hmm.
one. Feeling abandoned, feeling neglected, feeling not loved, feeling not appreciated.
Yeah.
All of those are associated with loss. I have lost something, right?
Yeah.
And there is a misuse. There's an identification with something or someone that makes us feel complete,
Yeah.
right? Right. We talk about my wife. No, she's not my wife. She, right, just happens to be the person I'm married to. Right?
Yeah.
There's ownership, right?
Mm.
And when we take this ownership to the car or the job or the house, the dog, the kids, whatever it is, and then we misidentify to say, if you leave me, I will die. No, you won't. You'll grieve for a while, right?
Yeah.
So the misidentification is that when that is taken away for whatever reason, or that person moves away, or the dog passes away, then part of our identity has been robbed, right? And all of that is an illusion, right?
Yeah.
Because how can an infinite being, that which is animating these bodies, how can they feel a loss of any shape or size? But it is a mental construct.
Yeah.
And it's an emotional construct. And I just want to correct you, if I may.
Yeah. Please do.
I didn't mention spiritual loss, because if
Oh,
we're
that's true. That's true.
talking
I
about
added that
real
in. Sorry.
spiritual loss,
Yeah.
yeah, you're trying to sneak these in. You
No,
thought
no,
like
it's
you'd
funny.
get
As I
away
said
with
it,
it.
I thought, oh, he didn't say that, and I carried on. Well spotted. No, like physical,
We put a
emotional,
little sign up, misinformation.
sneaking extra words in. So you said physical, emotional, and mental pain, didn't you?
Yeah, because the
Yeah.
spirit, if we talk about the spirit, the soul, the consciousness, it is untouched by everything that we endure through our life. Absolutely untouched by it. But the pain, the physical, mental, and emotional pain is very real, having been there.
Yes.
So we're talking about the identification that has been stripped away from me, and now I feel incomplete. That's actually the root loss of it. It's not the person, it's the feeling that I am no longer whole or complete. And this is what rebound relationships are. Is
Yeah.
the person is trying to become complete again, trying to feel whole and real again. And they're usually a disaster. Usually, not always.
Yes. And some of them, some of us know that very well. You know, some of us have gone from relationship to relationship. and to experience the same kind of thing. I'm pretty sure everyone that's listening today that I can see has had a relationship loss, as well as the loss of a person, and probably the loss of the identity. Like, for instance, I see a lot of people in this chat have, and you included, we've all moved away from our homes, haven't we? We've all moved away from our countries of origin. And there's a grief in that as well, although it's a different kind of grief. We might grieve. What are you doing in? We've got a dog busting into the into the office. Hey, stop it. It's a different kind of grief, isn't it? Like there's that happiness in moving on, but also the sadness in what we might be letting go of. Owen, he said this just before you mentioned about holding on to grief. Like, is it considered healthy to hold grief of a loved one? And maybe we can revisit that. I'm going to put a little star next to that because I think that's good. Probably going to.
It's a very good question.
It is, isn't it? Sarah's saying, so is the concept of ownership what differentiates sadness tears from grief tears? Many light bulb moments here.
Very good. Very good. So there are many facets of grief, and degrees of grief. And we all grieve in our time and our calendar. Right? I hear people say, "Oh, his mum died a year ago. He should be over it by now." Okay, really? That's his grief, right? And he'll get over it when he's ready, not on anybody else's calendar.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first went to Australia, we would see lovely Italian women dressed in black, and I inquired about that. And the story was that they were grieving for 100 days. And in that grief, they would not be happy. They wouldn't smile. They would be wearing black. And after that 100 days was over, then you could sort of get back to normality. That's a rather structured approach to grief. If you look at some Middle Eastern cultures, some African cultures, there's a lot of shouting and screaming. There's a lot of cultural sounds that are given out. There's many ways to grieve. And whatever is the most suitable for ourselves, and with the proviso that we're not harming ourselves and we're not harming somebody else.
That's interesting. Forgive me for 1 second. Are you able just to talk about grief in general? I just need to nip out. Sorry, I'll be 30 seconds. Sorry, 1 second. Is that okay, Rick? I know you got it.
Sure.
1 second.
Yes. Owen, I would like to address your great question. Is it considered healthy to hold grief of a loved one? Absolutely. Absolutely. Until some stage when you are ready to let that grief go, because almost at an energetic level, if a loved one has passed away, we are holding a connection to that person. And it is a gift to be able to let that grief go and let that person go on to continue their journey. It would be to have some structure to the grief. It lasts as long as it lasts. My dad passed away when I was 26. I don't grieve him, but I feel sadness quite regularly, especially when we got now twin girls, and how much he would love to see life in Bali and the garden and the kids. So do we ever stop missing somebody? I'm not sure if we do. The memories may fade a little bit. The love doesn't fade. And if we look within, I think we will find our loved ones there. And that gives me great solace that they've never left. And in the 5 people that I've deeply loved, that have passed away, each one of them came to me afterwards, after they passed over, and we had a conversation as real as this one. So I know they don't die. And so what I find is, and I don't want this to feel mean in any way, But most of our popularized grief, I suppose, is that we are grieving our loss. It's more about us, what I'm losing and the pain I'm going through, rather than the celebration of that person's life. And that's how I started at my mum's funeral. I went down to Perth, and there was a large crowd there. She was loved by many. And I said, I was invited to speak. And I said, I want to let you all know I'm not here to grieve my mum's passing. And there was a hushed silence. I said, what I am here is to celebrate her life and the gifts and the values that she passed on to me. And the whole room changed. And I had several people come up to me after and said, I've never heard anybody speak like that. And it was just coming from my heart. And do I miss her? Yes, I miss physically hugging her. Right? But I'm celebrating her in every time I feel the sadness of a little bit of sadness come in. I'm celebrating the gift that she shared with me, and love of adventure and travel, gardening, dogs, values, all of those things that we imparted. So the message there is grieve, open yourself up to grief and let it flow through, be unashamedly let it out. And at some time, focus on what have I gained from this person in my life, as opposed to what I've lost. Yeah. And that can be with a dog, it can be in a relationship, it can be a job, it can be a car, it can be anything that we feel the loss of. We can sometimes swap our attention to, okay, I really miss it, I'm sad, I'm annoyed that the car was crashed, whatever narrative we've got around it, and then switch this to, well, what did I gain from this? Oh, I had some wonderful experiences driving around the English country lanes or things like that. What have we gained from it?
Yes.
So I hope that answers your question there, Owen. Yes, it's 100% okay to grieve a loved one.
Yeah, he's saying, thank you, Rick. He's saying, I miss my mum every single day. I'm visited regularly by her, but I know that a pilgrimage to where her body rests will be my time to let that grief go. But she will always remain with me.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's also good to do some form of ceremony, right? That represents the letting go. You're not letting go is even not a decent word, because they're still within us, right? There's just this one spirit occupying 8 billion bodies. So how can they ever go anywhere? Right? They are within us. We are that same person. But I think for me, it was walking to a place where we used to walk in Australia, and there was a bench, and we would sit there and look over the river. The dogs would be fossicking around our feet, and we would sit there for hours and just chat. And I revisited that place and sat there, and that was my sort of, right, this is it. This is it. So it's nice to do that little ceremony in whatever form it is. I think that's why people go to graveyards and other elements of this grieving process.
Yes, I would say so. Bob is saying, do we really get over grief? We can process it, but the loss remains. And he's also adding in, what have I gained? Yes. So I think that's obviously been very, very helpful. Sarah's saying, sometimes it's very difficult to see what I've gained other than weight. You didn't lose your sense of humor, Sarah.
Yes.
I love that.
When we're in deep sadness, it's very easy to well, here's the trauma. We have the trauma of loss. And the first thing we want to do is disconnect from that pain, from that discomfort, and find some comfort in something, which is usually food. It can be any distraction that will give us a modicum of comfort. And after a while, if we're not turning and facing that pain and that loss and that grief, right, what happens is the comfort becomes the problem. And it can be alcohol, sex, drugs, work, social media. All of these can be giving us some comfort, and now they become the problem.
Yeah.
So we have to watch for that.
Sarah saying, my grief will last as long as I live, but it constantly changes. I guess that seems like quite an accurate conversation, statement. When I think about any grief that I've had, it doesn't appear to have disappeared. You know, there is some kind of marker or remembrance somewhere in my system that, you know, there was a person or a thing or an identity or whatever it is that I'm grieving about. But that emotion changes and it evolves. So I like that. But that really ties into Bob's question of, do we really ever get over it? You know, what about the loss remains, that we can process the grief, but the loss remains. What do you have to say about loss, Rick?
It ties into what I was saying earlier, that as infinite beings, how can we lose anything? How can we, we can feel those people, all those people that have passed away or whatever. We can feel them, we can sense them, we can intuit them. So they're not gone. And we know the physical body has stopped breathing, but that which animates it has not. And we are that same energy, we are that same essence. So nothing in us has been lost. So it's a mental construct.
Yeah.
Right? It's a very powerful one, right? And wherever there's a mental construct of that I am now incomplete, I'm a victim here, I feel depressed, all of those fear and grieving aspects, right? They can bombard us mentally. The stories that we go, especially if somebody's taken early, if there's a drunk driver comes through traffic lights and takes out a son or daughter, right? The grief associated with that is, the magnitude of it is usually greater than if somebody has a long debilitating illness that now we've got time to prepare for it. The other one, we had no preparation time whatsoever. It just hit us smack on. Right? As we go through the grief, if we allow ourselves to go through the grief, we will arrive at a place of anger. Right? And if you've ever watched kids crying because they've hurt themselves, virtually the next step up is anger.
Yes.
You know? They'll lash out at us. Now, hang on, I'm just trying to help you. Let me clean this wound. And they get angry.
Yeah.
It's very easy to distance ourselves from that anger. But I look at it and say, wow, she's coming out of the grief, right? She's coming out of the grief and now she's experiencing anger. And as long as that's not projected onto somebody else, because it's our anger, not somebody else's anger, and then we can process it and we can go up into, we start blaming people, we start blaming ourselves, right? Yeah. And then we go into overwhelm of it and we get pessimistic and then we get bored with it. I can't be bothered. So what's the point of breathing in? You only got to breathe out again. And we go through all these elements as we're going up this emotional tone to some mild interest, some high interest, enthusiasm, passion, purpose, gratitude. We can consciously do it without stifling what is there. So once we've got to a point where I feel I feel like I've grieved, I need to move on with my life. I still miss that person. I still feel a bit lost, but now I've got to function again. Right? And then we start coming up this emotional tone scale, and we can make ourselves feel better to a point where we can be steeped in gratitude right at the top of this emotional scale. We can be so grateful for having spent that time with us, as short or as long as it was, just filled with gratitude because we've gained something from it.
Yes. Yes, I love that. Thank you. We're starting to get some stories coming in now. I say stories, celebrations, I guess. Sarah's saying, mostly now I feel love in terms of her changed grief. Bob is sharing with us, Audrey, one of his daughters, died suddenly exactly 2 weeks before her 12th birthday. Oh, gosh, sorry, Bob. I always took yellow roses to her gravesite on the day she died. Viv helped me grieve years later by taking flowers on her birthday to celebrate her life. I love that.
Yeah. Once again, Bob, where there is a sudden loss like that, we are ill prepared to deal with it. Right? And it doesn't make any rational sense. And we feel angry. We feel this is not fair, the unfairness of this whole thing, somebody in the prime of life. But Bob, we never know what a person's life purpose is. We all come into this incarnation with a life purpose. And maybe Audrey had fulfilled her life purpose. Maybe I could postulate all sorts of things, but let's use a hypothetical case. A child comes into a relationship and there is a lack of love that's closed down, and that child opens up the hearts of their parents.
Yeah.
And having opened that up, and the love can be expressed, and joy and happiness of that child, the child's now done. I've done, this is what all I came into for. Right? I am done, and it's time for me to go, and we will find any way of disposing of these bodies. It can be in a long, debilitating accident, illness, or it can be an instant accident. Right? That's my read on it. My personal opinion from years of experiencing lots of deaths is that when we are complete on our life purpose, we will find a way of exiting this body. Right? Despite the fact that we will leave behind people in incredible grief. Right?
Yeah.
But our purpose is fulfilled, and it's time to move on. So that's my read on it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rick. I think it takes quite a lot of courage to say that, because, you know, so many people could project anger or loss or all sorts. You know, when you say something so beautifully articulated and so clear, I love you and respect you for that so much. Vivian saying, I miss my dad, but not all the time. And then there are times out of the blue where the grief of his passing takes me to my knees for no apparent reason. It's not logical, but it's very real.
Yeah, it's not logical because it's not coming from the left hemisphere. It's coming from your heart. It's coming from the right hemisphere. And so just embrace that. Yeah, it's possible. Overwhelming grief can bring us to a standstill, absolute standstill. So welcome it in to say, I'm now going to celebrate the passing, right? and allow it. There's another element of it, and this goes back into the 50s and 60s, and it especially affects men.
Right.
Is that we were told by unconscious parents, right, that you had to be masculine. Right? Yeah, in those days, you would never come out and say, I'm gay, right? Because you had to be the man and you had to put on this bravado. So we are taught by society and unconscious masculine to be a man, stop crying, don't be a baby, right? Don't be a big girl, right? Grow some balls. We are inflicted with this suppression of the grief. And so young men held this in. And the only way it could come out was in violence. it would be schoolyard bullying. The schoolyard bully is hurting so much inside, projecting that pain outwardly. And we look at the violence that we see in the world today, right? And this is because this is unresolved grief, unresolved losses, unresolved trauma and pain that's never been released, never been confronted. Let's bury it under alcohol or drugs, or just ignore it, into denial with it. Because our society said, you need to be the man of the house, and so on and so forth. So that's a load of rubbish. Now, conscious parenting is, you want to cry, son, here's my shoulder. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to hold you until you feel better.
Yeah.
That's conscious parenting. And it's released within 20 minutes. It's gone. And they're no longer holding that burden of that grief inside them. And they've been allowed a safe environment to allow to be express themselves as authentically. We've got a lot of work to do with conscious parenting.
Yes, that's really beautiful, and I can see how that works. When I first started coaching with astrological clients, I met a lot of people who were the children of early boomers, not so much late boomers, but more early boomers. So people that were sort of in their late 50s, early 60s, and I heard a lot about really horrible violence that they suffered in their childhood, and abuse. And I also, you know, like my dad's born the same year as you, and I've heard him. He doesn't talk about it very often, but the grief and abuse that he took from teachers at his school and his parents, people that had come back from the First World War, you know, or had experiences in the Second World War. I think there's a whole generation of people that have been trying to hold it together. The boomers, I think, have been really trying to hold it together. And there are some really magnificent ones, like your good self, who have been, you know, processing a lot of this abuse, or the results of it, and helping to transmute it. And then there's, you know, like the early Gen Xers, and then the younger Gen Xers that I'm at the like other end of it, you know, and we're dealing with the next layer down, and it's like it rolls downhill. In fact, Sarah and I were talking last Friday about shit rolling downhill, and how actually it doesn't have to. We could step aside and it could roll past us. But actually, what has appeared to happen is we're all people hurting each other. In a really real and palpable way. You know, my dad has, you know, stories about these ex-army majors that, you know, once the war was over, were put into schools to educate and beat some sense into people, and just the cruelty of how they took out their pain and anger on little boys is really disgusting. I mean, you can't imagine what they saw or experienced, but yeah. So I really hear what you're saying there, Rick.
Really important to do the direct self-inquiry wherever there's pain or grief or trauma. Dive in there and resolve it. What is it trying to tell? It's trying to come out. The very fact that we cry and we grieve is the releasing of this, and it's and physically the releasing of water out of our body. So we should turn and face this and celebrate and say, come on, bring it on. I know it's painful, it's awful, but I know that the process of releasing this is that I'm going to feel better, and I'm going to be able to function much better as a result of it. So bring it on, baby. Bring it on.
Bless you. In light of what we've shared, you know, there are, you know, younger generations coming through right now, and in particular the millennials and the Gen Zers, the Gen Zs. They appear to be getting a reputation of being snowflakes, or, you know, a little bit wimpy, a little bit too pampered, And I'm guessing they are feeling the weight of the collective grief on their shoulders and not knowing how to express it.
I think that's part of it. I also think that there is a balancing going on from the patriarchal society that's been with us for so long to a balance of masculine and feminine energy.
Right.
And there is then confusion, and there's societal pressures that are put on people. I'm witnessing now a lot more men that are addressing their feminine side, and as a result of that, much more balance. But in a society that's still stuck in this patriarchal idea, it can be very challenging, and that can be traumatizing as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's got some interest from Sarah. Direct self-inquiry. I love that.
Yeah.
So we've touched on so much in really quite a short space of time. You know, like the idea of where does grief start and end up. What aspects of grief have we not touched on? Or are there any you want to go in a little bit deeper with?
No, I think we've pretty well covered it. It starts with sadness. It starts with a loss, right? And then can finish up with, I haven't lost anything. And I've gained, and I love the experience of being with that person, even if it was short-lived, even if it was sudden. They were a gift to me, right? And I see everybody that comes into my sphere of influence as a gift, and they're not all nice people. And I just think there's usually a usual reaction as the ego steps up, right? And then then I'm calm enough to think about, this person's holding up this mirror to me, telling me or showing me, you've still got a little bit of this inside you. Right? And that's what you don't like. It's not about me. It's about what you don't like about yourself. So, this is the journey of consciousness. And all of these trials and tribulations are designed to wake us up, to make us stronger, more powerful, more sovereign. Right? And if we can see that as a path that is unfolding, it tends to lessen our grief, or the impact that the grief has upon us. And we'll still miss people. And we should never be afraid that we're going to forget them, which is a very classic case of loss, right? And so then you have to hang on to pieces of clothing or whatever in case I forget about them. It's natural. We will lose some of the memories.
Yeah.
But to cherish the ones that have really been meaningful to us, it helps to dissipate that loss. And that, again, is on our time frame, not anybody else's.
I really got it, I think, when you said, it starts off as a loss and can end up where you realize you haven't lost anything, but you have a gift. And I imagine that's an ongoing journey. And some people may never really truly get to the gift, or they might get to the gift of the person in their life and also still feel the loss. They might run. I can understand that they could run parallel. I wonder how many people really do get to the gift of it without the loss. But I really like that as an example of kind of where grief starts and the possibility of where it can end up. As a journey, and like you say, the journey of consciousness. And Sarah's added in, nobody said consciousness was easy.
Ain't that the truth?
Yes. And I do think you're right in the idea of like missing somebody, like, so people try to hang on, to remember. I've seen parents, or I've known parents who have lost a child, who end up doing something really quite remarkable, like setting up some kind of trust in the name of their child, and then raising awareness or doing something to, help other people that might be going through it. I can think of 2 examples that I know of people who've set up charitable trusts in the name of their child, and are working to alleviate the pain and loss of, other parents whose children are dying of, something that appears incurable, or with a really poor prognosis.
Yeah.
And I also recognize that, they are continuously remembering in a way that's kind of helpful. I really like, what Bob and Viv do, to celebrate Audrey's life. They, take flowers on her birthday, and they recognize the yellow roses, which she had on her gravesite the day she died. I love that as a memorial, as a way to remember.
Yes. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful.
So how do we best help somebody, like bearing in mind that there is this outpouring of grief that appears to be going on right now, and stories of grandparents leaving, and also stories of small children, like babies, being hurt. They're massive trigger points for nearly everyone, because we've nearly all left, we've nearly all lost a grandparent, a beloved grandparent. And for pretty much everyone, I think the loss of a child is like, doesn't bear thinking about. I can't imagine that kind of loss. Like, what do we do to help people that are either being projected into a sense of what would happen if this happened to me, or actually really going through that loss? What's the best way to help people?
Those that are going through it, to just hold presence for them, hold space. And they're not broken. They will move on from this. But using the 6 heart virtues, we can choose compassion. Right? We just see the person, see the pain they're going through, the grief they're going through, the loss they're going through, without trying to fix them. Right? Allowing them to process that grief and loss. So having compassion, having understanding of their situation, because they've explained it, and seeing that they are struggling with that, if they are, or if they're just processing it beautifully, great understanding, and being brave and courageous to hold that space for them, because most people cannot stand to see other people going through grief. They want to stop it, right?
Yeah.
We have continuously given our kids gifts. Here's an ice cream, stop crying, right? You'll make you feel better. Here's some sweets, right? We interrupt the grieving process, right? And that's the worst thing we can do, because it gets stuck in the body.
Yeah.
Right? It's the mental body, the mental structure of grief and loss, which impacts on the emotional body, which is the grief and the weeping. And then that gets caught up in the physical body. Anger gets caught in the liver, right? And so we need to allow our friends, our family, our kids to grieve, not to become victims, right? Not to prolong it and use it as a way of manipulation, but to be honestly grieving and just hold that space. Be present. In fact, that's the best gift we can give anybody in any stage of any life. It's just to be present, be mindfully present for them. That is the greatest gift we can give. Now, for those that are projecting into the future and mocking up a loss, I have a baseball bat here somewhere. Stop it. Stop making up stories that hasn't happened yet. Right?
I love your baseball bat.
Stay in present time. The ego wants us in the past or wants us in the future. Right? And it's so easy to dwell on the fact that what is the only certainty we have in life is that we're going to pass away sometime.
Yeah.
Right? And yet, in the Western culture, it's the worst possible thing that can happen.
Yeah.
I live in a Hindu society here, and I've studied Buddhism, and I've lived in Asia for 30 years. None of that is around, right?
Yeah.
People just get on with their life. They celebrate their life and move on there.
Mm.
So mocking up how bad you're going to feel when they've gone is just a story, right? And how does it feel? It just drags you down. Right?
Yeah.
So enjoy every moment of their life, because we don't know how many moments we've got. We don't know how many moments anybody else has. We have not a clue. Unless you're a Tibetan Buddhist monk that can predict the date and time of your death, which is a possibility, right? None of us know how many days we've got. So let's celebrate every day. Make it count. Really make it feel like this. What if I do if this was the last day of my life?
Yeah.
Right? And celebrate it. And don't let the mind carry you off on some forward future trajectory that's going to just make you feel sad and bad. When the time comes, then you can grieve all you like.
Yeah. I love your baseball bat.
Yes.
How very boomerish of you.
It's one of my coaching attributes. People say, "What do you do with your most difficult clients?" And I say, "I've got a baseball bat here." I've never used it. Promise you.
No, you don't need to, do you? Crikey.
No.
Apparently, I had grandparents that used to beat their kids with a hairbrush. That seems pretty brutal. Oh my goodness. Right, we've got some more comments coming in. Thank you for that last bit. I love that. Bob is saying, Louisa, I had to focus on the gift that is Audrey to survive it all. I had to focus on the gift that Audrey is to survive it all. Thank you for that.
She was a gift there. She was a beautiful gift.
Absolutely. Squire of the Shires is saying, when our gran passed, we chose a special spot in the garden, which we cleared of vines and thorny plants and refilled it flowers and sensory herbs, along with some items. It's now like a part of her is always here with us. I love that. Always. I love that so much. That's beautiful. Squire of the Shires, I love that garden idea. We know Audrey is still around us by the beautiful yellow roses that bloomed right after we moved into this house. Every bloom is a celebration. That's beautiful. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it, how nature does that? You know, how we get those lovely, people talk about white feathers and creatures and the significance of different things. I miscarried twins early on. This was 7 years ago now. And I didn't let the hospital do tests on them or anything. I just, it was early on, I was able to hold on to them. And so I buried them locally. And I buried them, with a little letter and crystals that I loved and with some music and whatnot. And a year later, I went back to the same site and it was surrounded by woodland. And all of a sudden I heard this kind of crunch and I looked because I was on my own in a bit of a deserted space. And I was thinking, oh, crikey, I hope I'm safe. But as I turned around, I saw 2 young deer watching me from the woods. And I was like, so surprised, I'd buried twins a year ago. I went back to see them or to, just mark their passing. And then there were 2 young deer and I never see deer that often, I was so surprised, but nature does that. It's, to me, it's like the spirit world and the real world, we are connected and we just don't realize it half the time. Sarah shared with us, I was told by a friend a year after my baby died to lighten up when I was talking to her. Oh my God. I understand this dynamic now and I'm not upset with her. I imagine you were there at the time, right?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Lighten up. Oh gosh.
Coming back to the 2 deers, one thing I encourage people to do is, and having had my own experiences, is to where we can be in heavy grief, but if we can be receptive to receiving the one that's passed over, because they will always try and contact us. Right? But if we're in a really heavy, deep grief and loss and feeling victimized or feeling angry, then we won't be able to get that message. But for me, 5 messages came through, and many other situations, there will always be synchronicities that appear, and the deceased now tries to tell us we're okay. There's no more pain. I'm out of this physical body. There's no trauma. I'm released and I'm free. So it's lovely to be able to be receptive to that, and then the synchronicities that remind us of that, how fluid and interconnected life is.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Pete, Solar Life Portugal, is saying that's so lovely. Square of the Shires. Sarah saying, now I know why we bought that baseball bat last year. That's fantastic. And Peter's adding, I love Hindu funerals. We went to a fabulous one that lasted over a week and even had Ravi Shankar playing. I want professional Nigerian mourners crying for me for weeks. Oh, Pete, you're not about to leave us, are you? And to be plasticized to annoy Diane, but she's not so keen.
Well, I've told my family that I want to be cremated, and I want every orifice stuffed with popcorn, right? So yes, so I have the last laugh on everybody.
Yeah, what, like creating popcorn that nobody can eat?
Yeah, of course. A bit like Spike Milligan's tombstone says, "I told you I was ill."
Yeah. Carl is saying, interesting, Rick. How is it for those that have passed to look back into this world and see the shutters down? Oh, that's
it's almost in amusement. It is almost amusement, because there's no mental construct. There's no physicality. So we're liberated. And there is a sense of, why the hell did I put so much attention on this, on work, and why was this so important? There's a lightness of being that is very common, very prominent. And the irony is, we can achieve this and sense and feel it and experience this in these physical bodies. We don't have to pass away. We don't have to. It's all available to us. The heart is the portal to consciousness. Right? Wow. And as we connect deeper and deeper into the heart, it opens that portal to the consciousness and these other dimensional experiences. We are multi-dimensional beings, so we can experience all of that in these physical forms and more.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And Carl is also saying, that photo you're crying over, that is not me. In fact, like when Carl's father died, Carl held, a bit like you held, you held space for your mum at your mother's funeral. Carl had a sort of pop-up kind of ceremony for his dad. It wasn't the actual funeral, but he organized, a separate wake, which really was a coming together. Everyone bought photos and everyone's chatting and putting photos on a timeline. And the stories were really kind of irreverent. There was no formality, no misery. It was really there to almost have a laugh at him, and to celebrate what a grumpy old man he was, and but to celebrate his dad as his dad actually was. Carl's saying, I am pure life and I love you. My dad didn't pop up, thankfully.
Well, when you think about it, if somebody's, like my dad died of a rare disease, only 6 people in Australia had it. Oh, wow. And you think that when you exit the body, there's no pain, there's no suffering, right? And that when from their perspective, this is a joyous occasion, right? And you're all down there sobbing your hearts out and bawling and dramatizing. I'm making this up as I go along, but
that's okay.
we can turn grief into an extraordinary story, right? And I don't mean to lessen it for anybody here, but the deceased is not feeling any of that pain, right? And most of it is our sense of loss and our grieving of that. I wish I could have done that, or I should have done that. Blame, shame, and regret. I regret having done that or not doing that. So that's our own personal stuff. We can't change anything.
No.
But what we can do on their passing is celebrate their life, celebrate the time we had together, celebrate their passing, and then become a better human being. So we don't do those things that we might regret in the future.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much. And it really matches the stories of people who've had those near-death experiences, where they've left their body and all they can feel is grace and relief, and also then they get that sense that their time's not there, and boom, there they are back in their body. Bob is thanking us. We are going to have to wrap this up now, but Bob is thanking us and saying, thank you for this discussion. We're lagging behind a bit, but it's so good. And we keep pausing to talk. Of course. And actually, I think that's the best way, isn't it? Sometimes to, to experience something is to like listen in, stop it. Like sometimes Carl and I listen to podcasts and we have to stop it and chat about what has come up and what our reactions are. Thank you for the suggestion for this show today, Bob and Viv. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope it's been great for you. Carl is saying, absolutely, Rick, no diminishing people's pain and grief. I hope when unlimited by a body, I will be the love I try to be when stuck inside one.
You won't have to try, Carl. You are that love now, and you will continue to be.
Yeah. Pure love beyond form. I might have to work myself up into that. I don't want to future project that one. Anyway,
carpe diem. Carpe diem.
Thank you so very much for, like you were saying, all we can do, like, don't fix them, don't interrupt the grieving process, but be mindfully present for everybody. Thank you, Rick, for being so mindfully present to everyone here today that's been watching live, but also for anyone that watches, in catch up. I know loads of people watch and catch up. So, thank you so much for your courage to express this. It's a very difficult subject for so many people. Thank you to everybody for their comments, everyone's participation. It's really taken shape because of what you've shared. And I just hope you all come back another time. We connect again soon. We got a final comment coming in from Squire of the Shires. Bob, I think she would love the roses. Her special place right there with you. That's beautiful. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah. And I thank you, Louisa, for creating this space and facilitating it. Behind every good woman is Carl. Not every good woman.
Behind me.
Thank you, Carl. And thank you for all joining in for your questions and listening. And just let's make the best of every day. We don't know how many we've got.
No, but I'm hoping to see you again soon, Rick. You are going into that cosmic space now where inevitably, like as the sun sets in Bali, your face goes like golden, and now it's kind of like cosmic supernova. But please do come back again.
I will.
And if not, I will tune in. Nice into me as well. But, we've got a couple more thanks. Thank you, Louisa and Rick, for Squire in the Shires, and also thanks to you both. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Squires.
All right. Well, I'm going to run the outro, but I love you all, and we'll connect again real soon. Lots of love.
We will. Big love from Bali.
Bye for now.
Ciao, ciao.